No, I'm good. I'm good.
I'm so close to the fact.
Hello, everyone.
Really awkward.
Hi. So I'm Jocelyn Miller. I'm a third year at the University of Connecticut, and I have a didactic to prepare for you guys today. So it is entitled Emergency Medicine Beyond the Emergency Department, Digital and Telehealth Training Needs. We have a panelist discussion today. So firstly, I will be moderating this panelist discussion alongside Dr. Mark Courtney over here in the corner. These are our disclosures. Some of the objectives that we have today, we want to be able to really discuss how telehealth at large, how do we incorporate this into medical student and resident education? We want to be able to talk about health system leadership. Okay.
Is there a train?
The delivery of actual telehealth and how different hospital systems do that. And we want to hear from 3 expert panelists on how they approach barriers, opportunities within each of their departments for telehealth. You know, they're at different stages of their careers, and I think they have a lot of good information to offer us. I'll let them introduce themselves, and we'll get the discussion going.
Oh, that's me. Cool. Hi, everyone. Thank you for coming. My name is Neil Naik. I am Assistant Professor of Emergency Medicine at Cornell in New York. I'm also the Director of Simulation Education there, and that's where my background is in simulation education. And I ended up kind of walking backwards through a door that got me into telemedicine and telemedicine education at our Center for Virtual Care. So this is a picture of our Center for Virtual Care. We have this really nice space that has soundproof booths that we can do simulated telemedicine visits for our learners. And then, next slide, a classroom where we can do debriefs right next door. It was really nice. I was really happy they built it in 2020. And then right before it opened, we were unable to use it for like 3 years. And so it sucked. But part of the reason we got this is we've actually been doing telemedicine training since 2016, and it's been kind of a growing program that got a steroid boost in 2020, and we now have developed training across our entire spectrum of learners. So we have a med school longitudinal curriculum that starts with the transition to clerkship. We do kind of a didactic-based kind of introduction to telemedicine, and then during their EM clerkship, they do a one-day or half-day course with us that involves simulation with standardized patients. We debrief and we talk a lot about how to do a telemedicine visit well, specifically the patient-to-provider kind of interaction. This encompasses doing a physical exam and even a little bit of clinical decision-making in this space. And then finally, we offer a 4th-year telemedicine elective for those people who are really interested. This involves some of the administrative stuff that goes into telemedicine and some of the other service lines that we offer within our department, some of the other clinical service lines. We also do training for our PAs in our PA school. This focuses on a lot of the same kind of content, basic kind of introduction to telemedicine, but also some provider-to-provider stuff that our PAs may experience throughout their careers. And this has been incorporated into their curriculum since about 2018, is offered every year. Some of our PAs and our ED help teach this as well because they are telemedicine providers in our ER in various ways. And then finally, starting in a month, we are doing the GME for all of New York Presbyterian. So that includes Cornell, Columbia, Brooklyn Methodist, and across all specialties, not just emergency medicine. It's a 2-hour course that is part of their intern orientation, and we're super excited about this. Also terrified about it, and we'll see how it goes. Also a simulation-based kind of experience, because ultimately, from my perspective, it's hard to understand how to do telemedicine well if you're not experiencing it, and really reflecting on that experience. I think one of the biggest things that, and we'll get into this a little bit later, one of the biggest things that prevents us from being comfortable in telemedicine is accepting that the patients have way more control. And we as physicians don't like that feeling of giving up control very much, and getting into a mindset that is different is key to doing good telemedicine care. We also do some continuing education with our faculty. This is more on a on-demand kind of basis, it's not a continuous curriculum. And next slide. We've also done some collaborations. We've created an online course as part of our certificate program through our eCornell site and worked with Emra on creating some videos, Walters Kluwer with creating some videos as well. And this is just the general theme of trying to get telemedicine education out there so that people who are doing it actually have some training in it and aren't just being asked to jump onto it without any training whatsoever. If you think about how much time we spend learning how to do a physical exam in med school or talk to a patient in med school when we are in person, we probably should be doing something with those skills when we're on a computer screen and talking to people. It's a different way of communicating, different expectations, and I think it's unfair to ask providers to do that without any training.
My name is Kendall McKenzie. I'm the chair of emergency medicine at the University of Mississippi Medical Center. And we have something we call telemergency down there, if you'll go to the next slide. Back in the late 90s, early thousands, there was a massive issue with healthcare in rural emergency departments across our state. We have about 80% of our counties in Mississippi are rural counties. The physicians that could be hired into those rural facilities were expensive. They were not emergency medicine physicians, and the local hospitals were struggling. Currently, about 50% of our rural hospitals are having financial difficulties and at risk for closure. It was more so back in the late 90s. A solution that we came up with was to train mid-level providers, and back then it was just nurse practitioners in the state of Mississippi. PAs were not allowed to practice there. But we trained nurse practitioners to work in these rural hospitals and established a telehealth connection back at our primary location in Jackson and consulted with the nurse practitioners when they were evaluating patients. To date, we're probably approaching about 1 million patients in the past 20 years that we've been doing this. So it's grown. We started with about 5 hospitals as a pilot project, realized that we thought that this was a safe concept and a safe way to practice medicine, and have grown to about 20, that fluctuates between 20 and 22 hospitals that we coordinate with, care with now. One of the tenets that we started out with was to keep the patients as local as possible, and we've had an increase in admissions to these local hospitals. So not only is there a cost savings from a staffing standpoint for these hospitals, but there's also an increase in patient revenue because they can admit the patients there. A medical director at one of these hospitals recently told me that the difference from before they started working with us to now is about $250,000 a year. And for a rural hospital, that is a massive amount of money and can mean the difference of keeping your doors open or having those closed. You see a couple of images up there, mock images, but that's essentially what it looks like. We've got a physician in Jackson who evaluates the patient with the nurse practitioner or now the PA. We do have PAs working there now. The medical patients that we see are easy. I mean, we do that every day in academic emergency medicine when we're working with residents. Residents present the patient to us and we talk to them about that and co-manage those patients. What's frustrating still, and even after 20 years of doing this, it's still frustrating, is whenever somebody's doing a procedure and you can't get your hands on that patient. So the training program that we have for the mid-levels is really procedure focused, heavily on procedures. We need them to be able to do those procedures because, like I said, we can't get our hands through that camera and do that for them. Some of the gist of this talk here is what training needs to occur for residents based on the growing use of telehealth technologies across the country. And I think one of the things that we could probably do a good job of during residency, or a better job of, is teaching residents about regulatory requirements of practicing medicine. And every state is different. In Mississippi, we have some, if you're a collaborating physician, there's some distance limitations associated with that, and some other regulations as well that wouldn't necessarily mirror another state. So it's important for a physician that's going to a state to know those regulations. And in this situation with us, we not only have to deal with the Board of Medical Licensure regulations, but we also have the Board of Nursing, which is a nightmare to deal with compared to the Board of Medical Licensure. So there are some issues associated with that. One of the most challenging things whenever physicians come into our department and start working is for them to wrap their head around the fact that they are not practicing medicine when they're seeing these patients via telemedicine in an academic medical center, which is by definition resource rich. You're practicing rural medicine, and what you have at the bedside or what you can do in your own shop is not what can occur out there in rural Mississippi. And it's a change of mindset, and that's a challenging place to get to whenever you want something done and you can't physically do that there at that distant site. So learning different ways of practicing medicine, which arguably are just as safe, but it's just a different way of practicing medicine. That's probably one of the biggest learning gaps that has to close whenever somebody starts working in our system.
All right, afternoon, everybody. I'm over here too. So I'm Emily Hayden. I'm at Mass General Hospital. I see some people here. I recognize some of you. Some others. And so we've basically been doing telehealth. We've been dabbling in telehealth. So we've done several different things since 2017, transfer coordination, virtual urgent care, community paramedicine, mobile integrated health with our mobile response program and virtual OBS unit. So several things we've been doing. And so the next slide here is that I've had to deal with working with my colleagues, practicing physicians, of how to do telehealth, right? So we talk about that we need to have telehealth in medical school, medical student education and resident education. But we have a whole dearth of practicing physicians who have not done telehealth. They've done FaceTime, right? Maybe something like that, Zoom calls, but actual clinical care, there are some slight nuances there. And there might also be some fear that we have to overcome too, and a level of confidence. So some of the things that are those barriers, because that's the things we're supposed to talk about, like what are those barriers, what are those opportunities? We need to recognize that this is a unique trainee cohort, right? Because you're now dealing with teaching your colleagues how to do something where there's a whole set of presuppositions there. They might be thinking lots of different stuff about telehealth, not always positive, and that you're trying to help them, and they're already busy. They don't want to all of a sudden have to do something new or learn something new if they don't have to. So it's recognizing that they are unique. And then this is another piece I didn't have this as a bullet point, but you're going to be doing much more just-in-time learning rather than saying, okay, we're all going to just do a big telehealth course for everybody in our faculty group. We can do that in medical student and resident. Really hard to try to do that in the faculty level. So it's going to be much more just-in-time. So when we were doing things with the virtual urgent care, I was doing, and I'll talk about it in the next slide, but we'll get to that one in a second. There's things we do that we find using different types of educational pedagogy and such to do that. We do need to recognize there's different aspects. So there's a technology piece, right? You know, some people still have trouble with Zoom when they come on and they're still muted and talking, right? There's also the website manner. So this is the piece that, like, how do you, what are those nuances with telehealth care that helps with your bedside manner or website manner that are just maybe not as intuitive? The last two bullet points, respecting the clinical expertise. We're not trying to teach people how to do clinical. You know, these are people who have years, decades maybe, of clinical experience. So you have to respect that when you're teaching, not try to say this is a blank slate. And then you also have to recognize that there's apprehension. I mentioned that earlier, the fear, right? There's apprehension of this new types of care, right? Like, am I going to become obsolete if I can't get this, or if I don't want to do this? And so there's fear there that you have to deal with that we may not have to deal with in some of the younger or earlier in the training. And time. None of us have time. We're all here and we're all trying to multitask right now too. So, and then this educating practicing physicians is also different than training the telehealth leaders. Like, you've got the telehealth champions and you're going to be teaching them how to, like, roll out a course or roll out a telehealth program and so on. This is really truly, how do you do telehealth? So next slide, Jocelyn. So some of the things that we've done, this is the just-in-time learning. We've done one-to-one orientation. So I met with every single one of our 55 attendings before their first virtual urgent care shift to make sure that they knew how to go through the technology and with some of the different points that we could do to help them figure out some of the website manner. We had pre-recorded videos. We had virtual at-elbow support. So I was there available 24/7 with my phone, and I would have texts at maybe 11 p.m. at night asking about what should you do with this technology problem. And so I was virtually at elbow with them for a long time. Then also in-person at elbow coaching. So I actually had the virtual urgent care from our medicine, Department of Medicine, come to me and ask if I could coach them. So I actually was in the room with the provider when they had the patient on Zoom, and I was actually at elbow coaching support there with, again, physicians in another specialty. So that's another thing to have to deal with the apprehension and the territorialism. So that was fun at times too. And then the just-in-time resources, so recognizing that there may not be things that people remember or even want to try to look at until it's right at that moment. So having really nice storyboards, which basically is the flow of how do you go through to actually log on, or how do you log out, or how do you do different technology pieces. And then also we've been doing some standardized patient and simulated experiences. So similar to what Neil was talking about, having standardized patient actors and have the physicians go through that, and having the actors actually give feedback with some of those little nuances they may not know about website manner. So I think that's the last of my slides. So now time for the panel discussion.
Yeah. So, just to go through my journey, so I told you I'm a third-year resident at the University of Connecticut. There in, at UConn, we don't necessarily get education on telehealth. And as you heard, Dr. McKenzie is in Mississippi. I'm going to be an EMS fellow in Mississippi, where I'll be working, in his unit underneath him. And I'm seeing on their website all of these different things about telehealth. And I'm like, how can I prepare myself if this is something that I haven't really thought of? And so then I go down this rabbit hole with the SAEM telehealth interest group, and I start meeting different people like Dr. Naik, Dr. Hayden, and we start discussing this, and we start discussing how resident education, medical student education, isn't incorporating these things that it needs to, especially if we're saying that the workforce training need for us in the future is going to incorporate telehealth into our future practices. So as we go through some of these discussion questions, I want you to think about your own institutions and how do you address this for both your residents, your students, and even the faculty members that maybe haven't practiced this. And the need will be there in the future. COVID just highlighted that, but telehealth did not start with COVID. It was implemented prior to that. So I am interested, Dr. Hayden, you have a virtual observation unit. Can you discuss with us, how do you even get residents involved in that?
Great. So the virtual observation, just real briefly, is for patients who are in our emergency department. Just note it's on hiatus right now too. But when it was working this past year, is when patients who would be going to observation level of care on our observation unit, we would actually, if they fit our eligibility criteria, we would send them home with remote monitoring equipment. We would have also a tablet and a hotspot in their tech bag they'd go home with. We'd have visits from community paramedics going out for vital signs, administering IV drugs, and doing having the video visit with one of our EM physicians. So we could actually give observation care at home. So for residents to be involved in this one of the things that we're doing is that we are on a chat when we're the care team, the virtual obs nurse, the case manager, the coordinator, the paramedic, and there's someone else I'm forgetting about right now. They would all be on the chat. We're on MS Teams chat. So to have the resident be a part of this, they don't have to come to my house to be in my office. They can be at their spot, and they can come in, they can be on the chat. We just assign them to the chat, and they can join the video visits when we're with the patient. So it's actually, for a telehealth experience, it's actually a quite easy thing for residents to be a part of for that educational sort of experience that way. So.
Did you have any barriers with ACGME actually getting approval for residents to get involved with this?
No, so if it was going to be, it was as a shadowing resident. It wasn't something that they were the ones that would be actually interacting with. They could, right? But they weren't the ones providing the actual orders at the time. It was much more of a shadow. So we didn't even go down that route. Okay. So it's a great question, though.
Dr. Naik, with your simulation center, you mentioned that you have multiple different rotators, not just emergency medicine residents. How do you wrangle all these residents if some of them are going to be practicing different forms of medicine?
Yeah, I think that was one of the considerations. I think when we started this endeavor, we didn't start it with the mindset of emergency medicine only. We started with the mindset of undifferentiated medical student. The first thing that we were asked to do when we started in 2016 was a med student elective for med students that were interested in telemedicine. And I think that was beneficial because it allowed us to kind of look at it and say, what are the essential basics that someone needs to start off with? So we're not going to focus on a specific field, we're going to focus on communication skills and the nonverbal, the balance between nonverbal and verbal communication and how that changes in the telemedicine space. We focused on physical examination skills, but general physical examination skills that any provider may need to know. And that's where it grew from. And as telemedicine grew, we started incorporating teleneurologists to help us kind of figure out what we need to teach in the neuro exam. We started incorporating other specialists, ENT physician who is doing a lot of telemedicine visits, helped us understand how to approach a nosebleed when someone called us about a nosebleed and things that people could do from home. And that's where we started to build our information base. When we run our courses, we try to keep it specialty agnostic. Our cases are not that complex. They don't require any special knowledge because we're not, kind of similar to what you're saying, we're not focusing on the clinical medicine. We're not focusing on teaching clinical medicine. We're focusing on how clinical medicine or the application of clinical medicine changes in this space. One of the ways to kind of conceptualize it is we do a physical exam in person in the hospital on the floor differently than we do a physical exam in the clinic, right? There's slight variations in there. So now all we're doing is putting it in a different place. And even though we're trying to achieve the same information and get the same information, we approach it slightly differently. And if we understand what information, what data we're trying to get, we can still get that by using the patient to help us elicit some of that information. And once we have that data, there's a second component of we need to figure out how to interpret this and how valid this data is. Do we trust it before we use it in our clinical decision making? I think that step is the added step in the telemedicine process.
Dr. McKenzie, you've mentioned that you have a centralized emergency department that then provides assistance to remote EDs with either nurse practitioners or PAs. How do you feel like, was there a lot of buy-in from leadership initially? I know you mentioned the finances. Was it difficult to have leadership at your hospital system? For you to even initiate any program such as this, was it difficult in the beginning?
So the most challenging, probably the most challenging, the challenging piece from our standpoint was getting around the Board of Medical Licensure regulatory piece. And because there was some regulatory changes that had to occur to allow us to do that. At the institution itself, there was some pretty good buy-in initially, and we actually started our program with some grant funding, so there was no cost to the institution to start that. And administrators love it when they don't have to pay for something and they get something new and shiny. So it really worked out. And like I mentioned, we started with a handful of hospitals, and once we proved that concept would work in a safe manner, there's buy-in just to grow the program now. So we staff our telemergency system on our end with physicians who are already working in our emergency department. The call volume is low enough that we can just factor that into one area, an attending who works in a specific area in our ED. We could probably double the call volume and still be okay from that standpoint. All of the hospitals that I showed on that slide they're not consulting with us at the same time all the time. Some of those hospitals have mixed staffing pictures in their emergency departments, where occasionally they'll have physicians working, other times it'll be nurse practitioners. So sometimes we're consulting, sometimes we're not. So it's not all 20 of them at one time that we're getting these consults with. So.
And a question for all of the panelists, and anyone can speak to it. So the future of the workforce is changing. We've mentioned there are now telehealth fellowships for providers to get involved with. Do any of you have that at your institution?
Yeah.
Yeah, I had one telehealth fellow come through, and it was much more telehealth. So she was on the virtual obs unit and then also doing telehealth research. So, but not SAEM accredited, because I know there's some people on that committee in here, I think. So, shh.
Gotcha. And on the day-to-day, do you find it pretty easy to incorporate residents into telehealth or even the curriculum portion of it? Do you feel like residents are receptive of it? Do they feel like, this won't apply to me, I won't be doing any of this? Is that accurate at your institutions?
So one of the regulatory pieces that we have to deal with is being collaborating physicians are doing records reviews and a quality assurance component of that. And we look at it like residents are cheap labor. They can do some of this for us and do the first once over of this record. And I think really there's an educational component for the resident. When you start diving into a chart and doing chart reviews and picking apart somebody else's work about how they managed a patient, there is a learning component of that. So we incorporate the residents by doing that, and they've embraced that without any issues. An interesting thing is some of our residents actually moonlight in some of these facilities, and they will jump on and use that telehealth technology to consult back with us. They got a question on a patient they're dealing with, and they'll freely get on the system, and we're happy to do that. We're not covering that hospital in the moment because they have a physician there, but we're happy to do that, and that's actually worked out well in numerous instances. And it's, if we're seeing a patient, just a general medical patient, run-of-the-mill emergency medicine patient, there's probably not a lot of value to bring the resident into that picture in the moment. If we're running a code through the system or delivering a baby through the system, it's not infrequent that resident will follow us in that room and be right there and see how that consult's done. So they get a pretty good idea of what we're doing with respect to that.
I think also we need to just be aware too is that if you are going to have residents do clinical on telehealth, you need to also be, you as the supervising physician need to be actually on the video too, with some of the regulations right now. So it may have to be rather than a Zoom call with the patient, I keep saying Zoom, but a video call with the patient and then the resident, and then they come back somehow in a virtual way, come back and talk to you as an attending about what the patient's plan is. Technically, you need to be on there. Maybe not the whole time, technically, I think you're supposed to, but it has to be like a three-way Zoom call where you have the physician, the supervising physician has to be on there, at least current regulations. So just be aware of that if you're figuring out how you're going to do this with some of your shops. So.
And we do a lot of simulated experiences, so we don't have to deal with the regulatory stuff. But I think one of the things to kind of realize is this is a changing landscape. So teaching specifics, and this is again part of why our focus on our curriculum is more on the general. Teaching the specifics are going to change, right? These regulatory things are important to know, but it's also important to kind of couch that and say, but this may change in 5 years, and so you need to keep up with what it's going to be in your specific state. Where you are going to go practice. And I think that that concept of the technology is changing, it's evolving, wearables are being incorporated, all those things. It's just important to have that perspective with your residents about we're learning stuff now, but this is one of the things that's evolving.
And then back to, I think the original question, I think, was if there's interest in it from the residency side, and I'll look at one of my residents, but yes, I think there's definitely has been interest. I think that they're recognizing, especially when some are getting out there, they're actually receiving sometimes when they're looking at job offers, some of it is, you're gonna be doing telehealth, right? And they're like, oh, great. Haven't done it yet. So I do think there's much more receptivity to telehealth education at the GME level than on the attending level, just personal experience, so.
Raise your hand in the audience if you're if you're associated with a residency program. How many of you incorporate telehealth practices into your curriculum? Okay. Now my question is for the people without their hands raised, what's that barrier for you? Is it GME? Is it, at the ACGME level? Is it a funding? Is it attendings that don't do telehealth? Okay. Yeah.
I can speak to it a little bit. Hi everyone, I'm Tony Fabiano. I'm finishing at Cincinnati, and then I'll be Judd's Telehealth Fellow starting in July. So I had the opportunity to rotate at Jefferson, kind of learn it all, and it's turned into a fellowship, but I wanted to bring that back to Cincinnati. The problem is at the institution level, there's not much investment in telehealth, and it's not really incorporated into the way that University of Cincinnati as a whole delivers care. I managed to sneak it into our curriculum through the simulation side of things, and has now kind of just within our emergency medicine residency, we've now done simulation in it, et cetera. But that's been the biggest barrier. If the institution as a whole isn't doing it, it's hard to get the residents trained on it.
Yeah, oh, go ahead. Yeah, but you're Judd. I kind of experienced a similar thing. So like I said, I kind of walked backwards into it. It started with the med school saying, hey, some of our med students are kind of interested in telemedicine because people are starting to talk about it. Can you create an elective? We had one person in our first elective, then we had 3 months, and then another person in the elective. And that we probably had 4 people total take our elective in the first year. The feedback we got from that was positive, and that went back to the med school, and the next year was a little bit more, and then we sat down with the dean or the vice dean, assistant dean, and we're like, can we incorporate this for every med student? And they basically said, well, you have to find time in the schedule, which is why it's housed in the EM clerkship. Which seems like a really strange place to put a telemedicine course, but we had control over that, and so that's where we put that. And once that kind of caught on, we had a couple years and we had some data, and it was positively reviewed, then the PA school asked us to do it because our classroom is right next door to the PA school classroom, right? And so they saw what we were doing, and then we did the PA school. We went to GME in 2019. And said, hey, we want to do this for all the residents as well, because our residents are starting to see their attendings do some of this. And they said no. And then fast forward, 4 years in a pandemic, and they came to us and asked, right? Because they're like, oh, we should probably do this, and you guys are already doing it, so let's do this. And so we went to them, we created a curriculum for them, and they go, we don't have enough time to put that in anywhere, so you have to cut it down to 2 hours. So we did, right? And it's not everything that we would want to include in it, but we boiled it down to what we thought was the essential points, and we did some asynchronous stuff, and we managed to fit it in. But it's a little bit of a progress. Like I said, we started in 2016, so it's almost been 9 years that we finally got GME to buy into it, right? I've had the same experience with our medical students, and it's gotten more and more, there's been an increasing interest year after year. And I think one of the unexpected pros that I've heard some of our med students talk about are how by doing telemedicine simulations, they've actually become better communicators in person with their patients, because they're forced to understand the patient's perspective better, and they're forced to use language precisely. Because otherwise it takes too much time. So
unintended pros that goes back to the other students in the years below, and I think it's been a growing interest as well.
Yeah.
Can I add a question?
Yes.
So I think, just again to introduce myself, Mark Courtney, I also want to frame this a little bit in the context of the workforce committee. So Jocelyn, Emily serve on the workforce committee. Neil, are you on the, you're not, no. So I think the other two speakers we kind of recruited in, but you know, we've been talking for the last 2 years as part of the SAEM workforce committee on, you know, what does the future of EM look like? What is the workforce that's needed to deliver care? And you know, this kind of started a little bit with Judd and a keynote he did a long time ago about just kind of thinking about what EM is transcended beyond just the physical confines of the emergency department. So what that really looks like is interesting. Telehealth and telemedicine is one part of that. And I think I'm going to ask the panel to like look into the crystal ball of the future just a little bit here. You've all answered needs, you've all solved some problems in different ways at your institutions and at your state level. As I look back 10 years ago, there was sort of an explosion of care and urgent cares and freestanding EDs, and emergency medicine as a specialty could have really owned that and dug into that really, really hard. And we kind of didn't because, you know, that's not fun, it's not exciting, it's not high acuity. And now we kind of look back on that and like, maybe that was not the way things should have gone. So as it relates to telehealth in the future for acute on-demand care, whatever we want to call that, maybe that's not traditional emergency medicine, but acute on-demand care, something that's needed more and more and more in the United States, which with each every year. What is needed for emergency medicine as a specialty to own that space at the training level or at the outcome level or at the policy level or at the training or at the mindset change of these folks? What do you guys think is needed for us to be 10 years from now saying, yeah, we're the specialty that owns this?
Funding. We need dollars.
Conceptually, great idea, but is there money there to support it? That's the big question. Can you develop a system that is self-sustaining and it's challenging without the government paying for it? So from an advocacy standpoint, I think the opportunities are there, but unless we collectively, in emergency medicine and in medicine as a whole, unless we collectively go and lobby for the dollars to be there to support teletechnology and healthcare via telemedicine, it's going to be challenging.
Now you've though come up with a pretty good business strategy to be able to make this.
And I don't want to get rid of it. Yes, we have. But what's interesting about telemedicine and teletechnology and the utilization of that is you could not pick up my program and put it in most places across this country and have it function exactly the way it does for us in Mississippi. I think there's opportunities out there to practice telemedicine, but they're going to be unique where you are. An instance that we have that we do in our emergency department is one of my toxicologists retired a few years ago and moved back to Colorado. Well, he's still on my faculty and he does telemedicine visits with my resident in my emergency department, and he's in Colorado enjoying a much better place than Mississippi. So, I mean, that works, and that filled a need for us. And it also gives our residents some additional exposure to, and they're actually on the other end of doing telemedicine. So I think there's many opportunities out there. I think one of the, I'm EMS fellowship tried, and my heart's kind of with EMS. I think there's a huge opportunity to get teletechnology out with EMS crews. Teletriage patients, do they need to come to the emergency department and be up on a wall on an EMS stretcher for 12 hours? Or can we take care of them and prevent them from coming in? That is a gold mine, but there still has to be some funding associated with it.
And I totally agree with that. And to be able to get that funding, to be able to get that advocacy, I think we still need to have more recognition in our healthcare systems as well as other specialties about emergency medicine can do telehealth, that we can get out from behind the triage desk, and that we do have value in that acute unscheduled care space that doesn't rely on being in the box of the ED. And I think part of that is just messaging. It's even if it's sort of locally grown, it's making sure that others see that happening and being like scratching their heads like, oh, I didn't know we could do that. I didn't know you could do that. And I think the other piece is data. So for those who are doing telehealth, getting the data out there, so that's one way to be messaging, so that it's on the radar of the people who are making some of the decisions for the funding too. Yes, going and lobbying, yes, doing the different things are very important, and there's more that all of us could be doing to try to spread that awareness for emergency medicine. And I think back to the question of sort of what's 10 years from now, I think it's a choose your own adventure right now. It could be that we're gonna see that this is acute unscheduled care or scare space. The virtual observation unit we have right now may just go to our home hospital. So internal medicine is going to be running the observation level care rather than an ED obs unit out there. For virtual urgent care, that could also be other family medicine or any other generalist specialties, pediatrics and so on. So we can either choose to be doing this as emergency medicine and getting our feet wet in the space, even if you haven't yet, or we can watch, just like urgent care, go to multiple other different places too. So it's a choose your own adventure. I have a certain bias, you might guess what it is, of who should be in this space, but I do think we all have a part in this one, so.
I'm going to spin it slightly on a tangent, which is should we be? And I think, obviously I'm biased as well, and I think the answer is yes, but I think the arguments for it are one, we are a specialty that is comfortable making decisions on incomplete information or partial information. And I think that there's a lot of telemedicine where it's, I don't have the best data, but I can still make a decision on this. And that's, I think, an important part of it, and not being paralyzed with that, which is why I think we are the specialty that should do it. I think the other reason why we should do it is ER has a lot of burnout. And there are ways that you can use telemedicine to be flexible in building your career and what it looks like, even a clinical career, right? I just had a kid 5 months ago, thanks. And when I went back from paternity leave, my first 4 shifts were telemedicine shifts that I did from home. And it was awesome, because I could see a patient and I got done 2 minutes early before the next patient, and I want to pop out and play with my kid for a little bit, right? And if you think about the flexibility that things like that give, some of the community teleparamedicine shifts, when I'm waiting for the ambulance driver to go to the next patient, I have the ability to go do some of those things, and I get to work from home. Those are opportunities that if you can be creative with, you can really extend careers, you can make careers a little bit more palatable during different stages of life. And I think some of that can help us as a workforce with burnout and what our field faces.
You have a course, a SIM course for students, right? Is anyone incorporating students into actual telemedicine visits and advice on how to do that?
We do, but not in like direct the patient care. So we have a community teleparamedicine program, and during that 4th year elective that students can take, they can go on the ambulance with the paramedics and be part of the visit. It's still a provider providing care to the patient, and they're along for the ride a little bit. That's, I think, the only way that we've really incorporated, but you guys can maybe speak on it a little bit more.
Yeah, we don't have anything that's structured. So if a medical student comes up to me and says, hey, can I, whatever, it's like, fine, we'll bring you in and it's be a shadowing thing. I think that until there's a critical threshold of telehealth occurring in a system, so, I mean, judge system, I mean, it's ubiquitous, right? And so there's many more opportunities to plug students in. And so it's not like there's a telehealth course. They're in cardiology. One of the days is maybe that they're actually doing the video visits with their preceptor there. Where in some of our shops, like there's a couple different programs, but not enough to sustain a whole medical student cohort to come through where everybody gets an equivalent experience. So I think some places just aren't meeting that threshold. There's a few places that are, so.
We've just changed it to telemedicine is just part of what we do. We opened up a $750 million brand new building. I swear to God, it's a true story. They forgot to design places to check the patients out. So they came to us and said, could you help? So my tech guy created with the help of a company, a virtual checkout. So there is now a whiteboard large TV in every room. They're going to do 1,300 checkouts a day starting Monday. We rolled it out on 3 floors 3 weeks ago. We're doing teletriage, right? You reduce your left without being seen from whatever high despicable number it is at your shop to under 1% overnight the minute you have an ED teletriage program. Well, now you're making money. It's $1,000 a patient. Our ROI on that is tens of millions of dollars over 3 years. You can now use that money to support your acute on-demand care, which otherwise is a money-losing thing. Then you can go to Congress, and I've been to Congress, I agree, I'm not gonna say it, but it ends in show, but you know, and start lobbying for it. But if we wait, I think this is, you know, Mark's point in urgent care, if we wait, somebody else is gonna do it anyway.
Yeah.
And so again, just like ACGME is an excuse, I've never even thought about it, we never considered it, we grew all these programs without thinking about it. If we wait to get funding, somebody else is gonna figure out how to do it while funding's coming along. And so if we wanna own the space, we just need to go own the space. And these guys are like leading the way in all this
Yeah,
stuff.
for sure.
So.
I'm hesitant to have an opinion that is somewhat against Joe's, but
Everybody else does.
but I think that the question, should we own this space, is one of the important questions. I don't think that we should. I think that we should be part of the owners, because I'm an emergency physician. I've done family medicine. I've worked virtually. I have all kinds of weird experiences. But I have spent at least a year doing nothing but telemedicine. It's way underutilized. It should be part of everybody's armamentarium. There was a time when stethoscopes were restricted to cardiologists. Regular doctors weren't allowed to use them because it was too advanced. Now I would say that most of us aren't using them because ultrasound was better. Well, yeah. So the telemedicine, in my the current place that I work, I would like to be able to have a teleconsult with a specialist and bring him in to see my patient. Dr. Neurologist, I'd like you to help me with this patient because I have no specialists except emergency physicians in my whole hospital. Well, I've got a couple, 2 family physicians, but basically they work for us. I would love to be able to get in touch with a pediatrician. Do I really need to send this patient? I've got the telephone. Do we in emergency medicine need to own the telephone? No, it should be for all of us. And yeah, we need to pick up our piece of it and run with it, but I don't think we should try in any way to restrict it from, make it just from doctor to patient. It should be doctor to doctor, doctor to patient, sometimes even maybe paramedic to, it needs to be ubiquitous. Thank you.
So you don't actually disagree with me. I'm talking about owning the operations of it. But all the things you're talking about, critically important. It shouldn't only be emergency physicians on the other side of the phone. But I can tell you when you can imagine if you have a neurologist designing a new program, they're going to dot every I and cross every T, and they're not used to uncertainty. They're not going to grow out the program till it's funded and everything is taken care of.
Then we will make it happen for them. But
That's
I
my
wanna
point.
get
That's
the-
my point.
I want to get the neurologist face to face with my patient because it's a little bit harder for me to explain how the face looks different where they could look at it and see it.
We did
Yeah.
1,300 calls yesterday, true numbers, 30 involved in emergency physician.
So we just have a little bit of time, and I want to allow Dr. Miller.
No,
wrap
that was
things
good.
up And to allow the panel to also
Yeah.
kind of wrap things up too.
I really want to thank you guys for the really riveting discussion. I think this is, not a one-off. This has to be ongoing. We have to continue to think about how do we incorporate learners, trainees into telehealth, into the future, the workforce. We are it. And how are we being prepared is the question that you need to ask yourselves, and where are we going in the future as emergency medicine? I really want to thank our 3 panelists that are definitely experts in their fields. We thank you for contributing to this conversation. Thank you so much for coming.
And I want to thank Dr. Miller for being such an awesome moderator, as well as herding cats to try to get us to do all of our stuff in on time. So thank you.